The Good Shepherd. This is Good Shepherd Sunday. So the fourth week of Easter always has some portion of John chapter 10 in it. You can see this beautiful image in the book of the Gospels of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, in this beautiful icon. We just came back a little more than a week ago from the land of icons, the land of sheep, the land of camels and church history and holy sites. We came back from the Holy Land. We saw many Bedouin shepherds guiding their flocks. For me, it was the most I've ever seen. Maybe it's because it's spring in the Holy Land and they come in closer to Jerusalem. I don't know. But they were out there, and sometimes they had goats with them as well. And they're shepherding the sheep, as was done 2,000 years ago. And we can see this in Arizona if we go to places like the Navajo Nation. And I have seen it up in Colorado. When we were on some of the four-wheel drive roads, you get up above the tree line and there's this beautiful alpine tundra, which is, I guess, like filet mignon for lambs. And I've seen the shepherd, and he has dogs with him, and they had dogs in the ancient times as well to help them shepherd the sheep. And the sheep master, the shepherd there in Colorado, was from Guatemala. So this is done in different parts of the world, and it's still done in the Holy Land. And what I found out is something they did in the Holy Land is something that, from what I understand from Bishop Richter's Bishop Ricken's homily this morning on Catholic radio, they still do. So he said when he went there to the Holy Land, I believe he said he was a seminarian, he saw that the shepherds at night would put their individual flocks, these shepherds that knew each other, into one big pen. And so at night, so they would be protected from predators and protected from theft. And he said that in the morning, right, you're like, how's the shepherd going to get his sheep separated from the other ones? He stands outside the gate with a special call, and they come right to him. And then he leads them off to pasture. And this is the same thing that happened in the time of Jesus. The shepherds would gather their sheep at night, put them in the same pen, and then one would be elected to keep guard at night and the rest would sleep. And so whenever there was any threat of a predator coming, he would alert the other shepherds and they would drive off whatever wild animal was there to devour the sheep. Protecting the sheep, guiding and protecting. Jesus is the Good Shepherd. He says that his sheep hear his voice and they follow him. And in other parts of John chapter 10, he says, they won't listen to another. They will run away from somebody else. And how is it we sheep hear the voice of Jesus and follow after him? What does that look like in the spiritual life? It looks like Paul and Barnabas in the first reading. They are out preaching the good news in a place called Antioch in Pisidia, which is in Turkey. I've been there, and I was there as a seminarian, following in the footsteps of St. Paul and St. Peter. And there's an amphitheater that they have excavated, and the ruins of a church there, ancient church. And we had Mass out there in the open area. And sometimes when you have Mass in these parts of the world, in these open areas, sometimes the sheep will be grazing in the field right by you, and you're like, gosh, I've arrived. So they're there in Antioch and Pisidia and preaching in the synagogue, preaching Jesus Christ. And their fellow Jews are listening. Some are very, very enamored. They said, hey, come back next Sabbath and preach again. We would like to hear more. And so they did. And almost the whole town comes out. But there are some who will be unhappy no matter what, and they were angry. And they denounced Paul and Barnabas and wanted to throw them out of town. And so Paul, who is used to this kind of treatment, this is what it looks like when we're listening to the voice of the shepherd, he says, okay, I'm going to shake the dust from my feet. We're done with you, but we're not done. We're going to go to others, people that are not of the Jewish race. We're going to them, and we're going to preach the good news. So they do. And we know that Paul, especially in his writings, had these 3 missionary journeys. What does it look like? Well, remember what Peter said last week. And I talk about being cross-contaminated, and that being a good thing in terms of Christ, that we've been so contaminated with the cross when the world says, hey, and the world has said this to me when I was out there in the working world, stop speaking in the name of that man. Peter says, hold on. I have to obey God, whom I can hear speaking to me through the Good Shepherd, and not you. And so they have them flogged and they send them out, and they rejoice. They rejoice in being punished for preaching in the name. What does it look like? It looks like John in the second reading. He's exiled in Patmos, this island, and he has this incredible vision. And it has to be a vision of the future because he sees believers wearing white tunics with palm branches in their hands from all nations and all races and all people. And you know, people get a little goofy if you bring up anything about ethnicity in a homily. I always try to say, let's not deny it, let's celebrate it. And that certainly seems like what is happening here. That John can see this somehow, that they're from different races, they're from different tribes, they're from different peoples, they're from different nations. Has to be in the future because the gospel has not been preached to the ends of the earth. And he sees them and they're all martyrs. They're wearing the garments of martyrs and they have their palm branches and they've washed their tunics pure white in the blood of the Lamb. Again, that's kind of a reversal because any of you know, if you got boys and they play and they skin their knees or they get cuts or whatever, that when you get that on a white garment, it does not come out clean. It does not wash out, but the blood of the Lamb washes everything clean. That's what it looks like. It looks like John being exiled on that island for a very long time for his faith. It looks like this little Albanian woman who was born in a different part of the world and became a sister, and then heard later in her religious vocation to start another order that would cater to, that would serve people that were on the fringes, the people that were outcasts. And that is Mother Teresa. That's what it looks like. What does it look like to be somebody who hears the voice of the shepherd? Now, there are people that will claim they hear the voice. Sometimes they come out after Mass and you've preached a hot button homily, or the deacon has preached a hot button homily, and it has rattled some cages and ruffled some feathers, and they come out and they'll say, the Jesus that I know, and they will fill in the blank, right? Something that is contrary to what Jesus says and does in the gospel. Absolutely contrary. And they said, that's the Jesus that I know. And I wonder where that comes from. We have three places, three things that we're tempted by. We're tempted by the self, the church teaches. We're tempted by the world, and we're tempted by the devil. But whenever you hear something like that, and if you're familiar with the Jesus of the Gospels, you will know that's not from the Good Shepherd. Oftentimes this happens in families, especially when hot button issues come up. What does it look like to be cross-contaminated by the one who is the good shepherd? Well, in families it could be that something happens and the husband and wife are contracepting. And then the light comes on. And maybe they'll go to the priest or they'll go to the deacon or they'll go to somebody in the church and they'll say, look, we've had this device implanted in the wife. If we want to live as the church teaches, what do we need to do? We can't afford to have it removed. It's like, we will help you pay to have it removed. That's what it looks like when we finally start listening to the Good Shepherd who is calling us by name, each by name. It happens in marriages when couples strive to stay together 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, praying together, reading scripture together, praying the rosary together, having family meals together, refusing to give in to the ways of the culture that tear families apart. That's what it looks like. In law enforcement or military service, it can look like somebody in authority who loves and respects and gives dignity and honesty and kindness to the people one protects. What does it look like? It looks like somebody going to work every day and being faithful. It looks like somebody who comes and prays in the adoration chapel and listens in that silence for direction from the Good Shepherd. Friends, the Good Shepherd desires to speak to each and every one of us. He has his general will, which we can see in Scripture and in the teaching of the church, and then his particular will for us, which never contradicts his general will. He's calling, right? This is Vocation Sunday. He's calling young men to the priesthood. They're here. They're here. I was up there. I received communion. I was hoping that a relationship with this gal I knew was going to work out. And I was up there after I received Holy Communion, and I'm kneeling down there behind the chair, and he said, what about the priesthood? I know he speaks to the young men in this parish. What happens if we ignore him? Yeah, he can work with us where we're at, but you'll have to sit there with your wife and kids, and you'll look at the priest, and you'll say, you know what, this is really good, but that's what he was calling me to. That's what he was calling me to. I don't want you to be in that situation. Women, religious, so needed in this world. Calls to women, and this perpetual virginity, this giving of oneself as spouse to Jesus in a religious community, beautiful, beautiful. Women are all over the world. Some of them are just so solid in the faith. He's calling us. He desires to speak to us. Sometimes he tells us, stay away from this and gravitate towards that. He will tell us sometimes you're in a toxic relationship, time to pull out. He will say, you need to go deeper. You sign up for adoration in the chapel, but you don't come. You need to go deeper. How do we hear that voice? There are many ways, and I don't have the sum total of how we hear it. Sometimes I feel like I'm on my motorcycle or on my quad out there in the wild, and if I shut the music off because I got a headset, it's like through that wind, it's like, what are you saying to me? What are you saying to me? Maybe it's on your walks. Maybe it's on your runs. Maybe it's in the adoration chapel, sitting silently and saying, you know what, I don't know what to say right now, but I'm just going to sit here and look at you and let you look at me. Maybe it is breaking open the Word every day and letting that speak to us. It could be in a dream. That's what happened to me too. I had a dream, and it was obvious from that dream. Certain individuals were quoting Hebrews chapter 5, and I had no idea what that was until I opened the Bible, and then my jaw hit the floor. He doesn't give everybody those same kinds of messages. He tailors it to each and every one of us. So friends, the shepherd who is also the lamb, and he's also the altar, He's the sacrifice. He's the priest. He's the Son of God. He's calling us. He wants to speak to us. Are we listening?